Okay, so welcome everyone to this deep dive. We're going to be talking about something. Well, it's a concept that's been around for millennia, and it's
Yes.
something that people find really fascinating. It's the Omphalos.
Omphalos.
Yeah, and most people they might recognize that word as like as the navel of the world, right? That
Right.
sort of sacred center point that pops up in so many cultures.
Right.
But we're not just going to stop at the traditional definition. We're going to dive into this theory that suggests the real meaning and power of these Omphaloi. Well, it's been hidden on purpose, like it's been intentionally obscured.
Intentionally.
Yeah, and that their influence is secretly shaping history, like the history that we all know.
You know, it is fascinating how this whole concept of a center point, a sacred center point, it resonates all across the globe, throughout history. It almost seems like we as humans, we have this desire to find our place, to understand where we fit in this huge cosmos.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. From like the very first myths that shaped civilizations,
Yeah.
all the way to how we think about like geopolitics and strategy today.
Yeah.
That idea of a central point, it carries so much weight.
It does.
And the Omphalos, I mean, with its ancient roots and how it appears everywhere, it really emphasizes that central point idea.
Yeah.
So the big question, the question that we're trying to answer in this deep dive is, are these symbolic centers? Are they just relics of the past? Or do they represent something real? A real power, a tangible power. That maybe, just maybe, is being secretly controlled by somebody or something. That's the heart of the Omphalos conspiracy.
The Omphalos conspiracy.
And that's what we're going to explore.
Okay, so let's start by unpacking the mythology behind this theory, like the ancient beliefs about these power centers, the places where creation supposedly began.
Yeah.
I mean, this conspiracy, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It draws its power from these beliefs that people have held for centuries.
Exactly. So let's start with a really famous example, Delphi.
Ah.
The navel of the earth.
Delphi.
The ancient Greeks, they really believed that a certain stone at Delphi, that stone marked the literal center of the world. And the legend says that Zeus himself, he wanted to find this exact spot. So he released two eagles, one from each end of the earth. And the point where they met, that was the planet's navel. And guess where it was? Delphi.
And Delphi wasn't just a random spot on a map, right? It became the home of the most powerful oracle in the ancient world.
Exactly.
I mean, what do you think is so important about that connection between the Omphalos and the oracle?
Well, I think it connects the Omphalos to something bigger than just the physical world. It ties it to divine wisdom, prophecy, and even to earthly authority.
Right.
I mean, people, rulers, regular people, they would travel for miles and miles to consult the oracle at Delphi. That tells me that they believe that this center of the world, it was a powerful source of knowledge,
Yeah.
of guidance.
And if we look at the bigger picture here, the Delphic Omphalos, it wasn't just a marker on the ground. It was a focal point. It was a focal point for both spiritual power and political power. It reinforced the idea that this specific location, this spot on Earth, had this unique connection to the divine.
To the divine. And this concept, it's not just limited to the Greeks.
Right.
We see similar world navels in other cultures too, like Mount Meru.
Mount Meru. In both Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, it's not just a mountain, it's the central world mountain.
Yeah.
The Axis Mundi.
The Axis Mundi.
The thing that connects the earth to the heavens. Think of it like a central pillar, holding everything together. It's the link between different levels of existence, from the physical world to the heavens. It's central to their understanding of the cosmos.
It's that same idea again, of a central point, a bridge between different realms,
Yeah.
a source of order, stability.
Right.
And then there's the Temple Mount in Jerusalem,
The Temple Mount.
a site that's sacred to so many religions: Judaism, Christianity, Islam.
And it raises a big question. What is it about this place that makes it so important to so many different faiths? I mean, the belief that it's the foundation stone of the world, the point where creation started, that's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And we can't forget about all the indigenous traditions around the world. You find these sacred sites in so many cultures, stones, natural formations, and they all believe that these places are the navels of their lands.
Your lands.
Not necessarily the whole world, but their specific part of the world.
Right. It's their point of origin, not just geographically, but spiritually and culturally too. It's where their people come from.
So we're seeing these common threads in all these examples. What are the main themes that emerge?
Well, there's this idea of creation, of origin, the navel as the birthplace. Whether it's the entire cosmos or a specific group of people, we also see this strong connection to the divine. It's a place where people believe they can communicate with higher powers. And there's this element of authority, earthly authority. These centers often give legitimacy to rulers and spiritual leaders. And then, of course, there's the idea of cosmic order. The navel is the point that anchors everything, that holds the universe together in a way that makes sense.
So we have this really rich mythological background, this foundation. And that's where this conspiracy theory starts to grow, because it takes all these beliefs about the power of these world navels.
Right.
And it adds this radical twist. The theory says that these aren't just symbols anymore. The Omphalos conspiracy says that these navels of the world are, or at least were, places of immense power. We're talking about energy, spiritual forces, maybe even dimensional forces.
Yeah.
All concentrated in these specific spots on the planet.
And it says that there are people, a select few, who have always known about this true power.
Right?
And they've been manipulating these centers for their own purposes.
But imagine there were these ancient keepers.
Ancient keepers.
The theory says that the ancient priests, the secret societies, they weren't just interpreting divine will, they were guardians. They understood how these Omphaloi worked, the science of it, and they knew how to use that power.
So think about the oracles again.
Okay.
This theory says that those pronouncements, those prophecies, they weren't messages from the gods.
Right.
They were manipulations, carefully planned manipulations of the energy coming from these centers.
Like to influence politics.
Yeah.
Maintain their power. Maybe even predict the future and control it.
And then there's this idea of suppressed knowledge. The theory claims that as societies changed and new religions came about, the real truth about the Omphaloi, it was hidden. People were given simpler explanations, religious interpretations, myths. Why do you think they would do that? Hide this knowledge?
Well, the theory says it's about power. The people in control. They wanted to keep their power. If everyone knew the truth about these centers, how to use them, it would change everything. It would disrupt the whole system.
So they shifted the narrative.
Yeah.
They made it all about symbols and religion.
Exactly. So they could keep the real power hidden away from the public.
And this manipulation, this control, it doesn't just disappear, right?
Yeah.
The theory says it continues to this day.
Yeah, to the present day. And who are the ones pulling the strings now? The theory usually points to powerful global organizations, secret societies, shadow governments, the usual suspects in a lot of conspiracy theories. They say these groups know about the Omphaloi, and they're actively trying to control them or neutralize them.
So how do they supposedly do that? Control these ancient power centers in the modern world?
One way, they say, is through geopolitics. They point to all the conflict and instability in the world, especially around places that used to be sacred sites, like Jerusalem or the Middle East in general. And they say these aren't just random conflicts. They're deliberate. It's all about controlling these important points on the map.
So they're looking at global conflict through a different lens.
Yeah, as a struggle for control over these ancient power centers.
That's a pretty big idea.
It is, but there's more. They also talk about energetic exploitation.
Energetic exploitation.
Yeah. The idea is that these centers, they're like giant batteries, full of untapped energy. And powerful groups are secretly using this energy. Maybe for technology or something else. We don't know. But they're keeping it all hidden.
That's interesting. What else?
There's the idea of spiritual control, too. They say that by messing with the energies of these sites, these groups can manipulate people's minds, control what they believe. And that way, they can control the world, not through force, but through spirituality.
So they're controlling the world's energy and the world's minds.
Yeah. And then it gets even weirder.
Sort of weirder.
Yeah. There are some versions of this theory that say that some Omphaloi aren't just energy centers.
Right.
They're gateways, portals to other dimensions, other realities. And whoever controls those gateways, well, they control everything. They can decide who comes in and who goes out. Or maybe they're even using these portals for their own purposes, going to other dimensions. Who knows?
So we have all these claims of hidden power, of manipulation. But what evidence do they have? What do the people who believe in this conspiracy point to?
It's a mixed bag. A lot of it is based on interpretation. We talked about the geopolitical hotspots. They say the conflicts in those places, they're proof that someone is trying to control these ancient centers.
But what about physical evidence, like archaeology or scientific data?
They do point to some things, like unexplained archaeological discoveries, or weird energy readings near these sites, or strange weather patterns, things that science can't explain. And they say that these anomalies, these weird things, they prove that the Omphaloi have hidden power, or that someone is using secret technology to control them.
Interesting. And what about old texts, myths, legends?
Well, those are super important to them. They look for clues in those old texts. They reinterpret myths and legends, especially ones that talk about these centers. And they say that mainstream historians, they've been ignoring this real history or downplaying it.
So they're looking for the hidden meaning.
Yeah, the suppressed knowledge. And they also look at symbolism, like circles, central points. They see those symbols everywhere, in architecture, in religious art, even in logos.
Logos.
Yeah. And they say that this is proof that the Omphalos concept is real and that someone is controlling these centers. It's like a secret language.
It is secret language.
And then there's the Delphi effect. Remember how some oracles, like the one at Delphi, they made these predictions that actually came true?
Right.
Well, they say that this wasn't just luck or divine inspiration, it was manipulation. They say that if you can control these centers, you can control information. You can even control events, shape the future.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. But let's talk about motive. Why would someone want to keep all this secret? Why hide the true nature of these world navels?
Okay, motive.
Well, it comes down to power, control. One reason is just to maintain their power on a global scale.
Global power.
If these centers really do have this much influence, then controlling them would give you power over everything.
Right. It's like if you control the center, you control everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another motive is technological advantage.
Yeah.
If these Omphaloi are sources of energy or gateways to advanced knowledge, then whoever controls them would be way ahead of everyone else, technologically speaking.
That's going back to the more esoteric side of the theory.
Yeah, it is. And then there's spiritual domination. By controlling the spiritual energy of these sites, they could manipulate people's minds, control what they believe,
Control
over spirituality.
Control their spirituality.
And some people believe that the real reason for keeping this all secret is to prevent enlightenment. They say that if we really understood the Omphaloi and how they connect to our consciousness, to other dimensions, it would trigger a global awakening. People would wake up, and that would change everything. But the people in power, they don't want that.
They want to keep us in the dark.
Keep us off center so they can stay in control.
Okay, so we've looked at the claims, the evidence, the motives, but it's important to consider the other side too, the skeptics, the people who don't believe in this conspiracy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because as interesting as this all is, there are some problems with the theory. One big one is that there's no real proof.
Yeah.
They talk about hidden energies, dimensional gateways, secret technologies, but there's no scientific evidence, no proof that any of that is real.
And the symbolism, that's a big part of their argument. But that's all interpretation, isn't it?
It is. It's subjective. It's easy to see patterns where there aren't any, especially if you're already looking for them. Like, they see circles everywhere, but circles are a common shape. They appear naturally. It doesn't mean they're all connected to some Omphalos conspiracy.
Right. And what about all the geopolitical conflicts? They say those are all about controlling these ancient centers, but isn't that a bit simplistic?
Yeah. The world is complex. Conflicts happen for all sorts of reasons. Politics, economics, religion, history, reducing everything to just this one thing, controlling the Omphaloi. It ignores all that complexity.
And the sacred sites. The places that are so important to so many cultures and religions. Just because a place is sacred doesn't mean it's being manipulated.
Right, no, not at all. People have been worshiping at these sites for centuries. Their beliefs, their traditions, that's why these places are so important. It doesn't have to be some secret conspiracy.
So as we wrap this up, what are your main takeaways from all this? What have we learned from this deep dive into the Omphalos conspiracy?
For me, it just shows that we humans, we're fascinated by the big questions. Where do we come from? What is this power that shapes the world? Are there hidden forces controlling everything? The conspiracy itself might not be true, but it speaks to our deepest fears and curiosities.
It's interesting how it takes these ancient ideas, these sacred centers that have been sources of meaning for so long, and it reinterprets them through a modern lens, a lens of suspicion, skepticism, like we're always looking for a hidden agenda.
Right. It's like we want there to be a deeper explanation, even if it's a scary one.
So the big question remains, are these navels of the world just symbols? Or is there something more to them? A real tangible power that's been controlled in secret for centuries? I don't think we have the answer to that.
We might never know for sure, but I think it's good to ask the question.
Absolutely. It makes us think. about power, about history, about our place in the universe.
Yeah, it does. Well, on that note, thanks everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the Omphalos conspiracy. It's a topic that will probably keep us all thinking for a while.
For a while.
And maybe that's the point.
Maybe it is.
Thanks again for listening.